planning your PB webinar. So this shouldn't take too long. Oh, here we go. So just a quick overview. So what is digital PB? We talk about PB in a short way, which is a way for communities to decide how money is spent, either by proposing ideas, discussing them, and then voting on them. I use this graph in literally every webinar now because it's really easy, but usually, traditionally, it'll start with a budget. So you'll have a pot of money, and then people can generate ideas. Communities can contribute their ideas, and then there'll be a time or a space for deliberation and discussion, and then prioritization of these ideas, sifting through them, perhaps going through like a support phase or something, and then to a final voting phase, and then fund allocation where the winning projects or proposals will be allocated money. But as I said before, it doesn't always have to start with a pot of money. It could start with prioritization of themes. So you could actually decide, okay, what do we need in our community, or what do we need in our local authority before we even get to deciding on ideas, or we even get to thinking about a budget. So the pot of money can actually come way at the end, and it can actually start with idea generation. So the first thing you really need to think about before you plan your PB process is your aims. So why are you doing it in the first place? What are the aims for your overall PB process? What are you hoping to get out of it? And this is a good starting point for designing any process you do and thinking about how some of the digital tools might fit within this. So a few things you might want to think about is ensuring everyone is involved. So citizens, other stakeholders, your colleagues, are they on the same page with your sort of aim? And you want to design a process that matches the aims and purpose. And again, you'll want to develop comms that match these purposes and develop key indicators to aid in your evaluation. So think about some of your aims and how you've met them in your evaluation. So New York's publicly stated goals. So their PB process, they put these up. So they wanted it to open up government, expand civic engagement, develop new community leaders, build community, and make public spending more equitable. Again, other purposes could include changing the relationship between citizen and state and developing new forms of governing, engaging people who feel disempowered and disconnected from traditional decision making, to improve buy-in for budgetary decisions, to improve redistribution, capacity build and support citizens to understand more about how government works, and to inform future engagement outside of this programme. Again, it could build relationships between different members of the community and improve community cohesion, so how council and citizens and community all work together, and building trust between decision makers and citizens or residents. So New York's principles, this is just an example of some of the principles. So empowerment, so enabling local people to decide how PB works in their communities and across the city. Transparency, so sharing information and making decisions as openly as possible. Inclusion, so they wanted to make, well they made special efforts to engage people who face obstacles to participating, like often excluded or disillusioned with government. And equity, ensuring that the decision-making process is accessible to every person. And the last one was community, so bringing people together across traditional lines of division to work together for the good of the whole community. So whatever your division or problems or whatever, you're working together. So I've took this actually from What Works Scotland, and it's just a kind of idea of how you might sort of start thinking about some of the things or some of the aims and principles that you might want to have for before you even plan your PB process. So this is from What Works Scotland, the policy briefing for mainstreaming PB in Scotland. So I've stolen it from that and hope that's all right. But here's some examples. So emphasis, scope and scale. And there's a few key choices here that you might want to think about. So for emphasis, what kind of thing are you wanting to focus on? Is it social justice and redistribution, engagement, or is it a mix of these things? Scope. So is there going to be a theme around it? Is it going to be about education or poverty? How is it going to be geographically specified? So is it our neighbourhood? Is it citywide? Or is it a bit of both? So one process citywide and one more local, so one more community-based. So there's so many ways that you could do this. And again, scale, what we're talking about. So neighbourhood, PB takes the place at the level of sort of neighbourhood, or is it bigger than that? And again, multi-level. So how are you going to bring the neighbourhood to larger, to citywide or local authority level? How are you going to connect these two as well? So funding, obviously there's lots of different types of funding that you can get. The traditional or the most common that we've got in Scotland are community grants, so programme funds, like the community choices ones. Mainstream budgets, so a percentage of a service budget, like a council service budget, or combined, so a mainstream budget topped up by a sort of community grant, and you could do a bit of both. So one sort of process under community grant and one under mainstream, or connecting them in some way. Facilitation, so how are you going to get facilitators? What would they include? So a facilitator could be someone that's from your organisation. So if you belong to a community that's running a PB process, or a council, or you could get someone outside, so they might be a little bit more neutral to the process. Or you could get a bit of both. Proposals. So how are you going to run your proposals? Will it be from the community? They'll be generated by citizens or third sector organisations, from neighbourhoods, from local level people generating ideas and putting them out? Or will it be from sort of agencies or people, collaboratively working together to bring out a few proposals, ideas that the citizens can decide upon? Or is it going to be a mix of the both? And participants. So who is going to be directly affected by participating in your PB process? Is it every citizen in your local area? Or is it specific groups that you're trying to target? Or a bit of both? Participation, so how would they actually prefer to express their preferences through voting? Or is it going to be deliberative? Are they going to sort of have time and space for discussion at events? Or is it all online, or a bit of both? So you want to consider how people are going to be participating in your process. And then decision making. So is it citizens decide completely? And that could be from the very outset. So citizens could decide the actual design of your process. So they decide the timeline, how many votes people should get, and that could be like I'll talk about this a bit later with the New York example. But for example, citizens could be put into like steering groups or committees and decide. So citizens, again, they could be involved, but decision makers still hold a level of control over what happens in the final outcome. Or it could be a bit of both, so using deliberation as a sort of way to balance this. And then institutional fit. So how is the final budget approved by elected bodies? So whoever the funders are, or the staff, how's that going to work with the annual budgetary process? And again, how's the budget allocated by an organisation without approval? So how is that going to work? You need to have a think about that. So where are you starting from? You need to really think about how this will fit alongside other opportunities to participate in decision making, and what will make this meaningful for citizens. So what is the meaning for them? Is there already community or council meetings that are already happening? And what are they if there are? So are there perhaps other engagement activities, hosted by other organizations, even like charities or communities or other parts of your organization that you could partner with? Are there other organizations who have significant reach into the communities that you could work with? And how could you bring sort of opportunities to bring traditional, decision makers alongside your community? How can you connect these two? So, what resources and opportunities are there you can build from? So you need to make sure you're clear about what budget you have available for your PB process and the restrictions on how this can be used. Do you have a required time frame? You'll also need to ensure that you're clear about what resources you have available for delivering this project. So are there others, like I was saying just before, who else is there that you could work with, that you could get involved in, that could help provide additional support? Think about how you're going to make decisions about the design of your process. So I was talking about slightly about this before, about getting citizens involved in the actual design of your process. So they decide the timelines, they decide how many people vote, they decide the sort of idea generation or the events and the style of that or the theme that it's meant to be on. So who from your organization should be involved? Do you want to bring in citizens to design your process? Do you want to ensure that you're bringing in some elected representatives, possibly, or senior decision makers? And again, how can you ensure IT and comms and marketing teams have their voice heard early? So you need to consider your communication strategy from the outset. How can you bring in those who you hope to impact the PB process into designing the process itself? So what I was talking about is bringing citizens themselves in, and this could have a few impacts. So an increased range of perspectives in designing the process, which can lead to smarter design. You could even identify new challenges and create interventions to challenge these. So changing your process from the very outset when you know there's going to be problems. And these are going to be informed decisions because people who are making the decisions have the lived experience of the very people that you're trying to reach. You're increasing trust in the process. So by including those at the very start, by including citizens that you're trying to target, they've already, because they're deciding how it's going to work, you've already increased the trust. Developing advocates for the process. So who can help share the word? This is kind of part of the communication strategy you want to build from the start. But by getting people or citizens involved at the start, you've already got people that are wanting, well, hopefully wanting to spread the word. And again, it's an increase of ownership that the community has over the process itself. So it's not just the council's process or one person's process, it's the community itself that's running it. So how can you use the process to have the most impact? So I was talking a little bit about this, but can you create a steering group made up of people that the process is targeted towards? Could you design an event where citizens themselves can work together to help design the process? Again, is your PB process organised around a theme or service? So who does this affect the most? Is it going to be run across the geographic area? How are project proposals going to be generated? So these are, again, some design elements that you need to think about. Who else should be involved in the design? So I spoke a little bit about that before. Who is going to actually allow people to participate? So is there one or two people that have started the process idea? Do they decide who's going to be able to participate? How open are you going to be about this? So if you're a council, how are you defining participant? Is it any citizen who lives, works, or goes to school in the area? Is it restricted by age? Is it people that are sort of working in a particular work environment? So people working in education, they get to decide, or be part of a steering group that's on the theme of education. And how is funding going to be allocated? Are you going to invite citizens and residents to deliberate on this or build consensus? Or are you going to just ask them to vote upon the proposals? And once citizens have reached a decision, is this decision binding? Or are you going to want to elect some representative or someone to sort of sign off on these requested activities? So there's a lot to think about in actually who's involved and why. So why do you want these people involved from the outset, or why are these people not involved until this point of your phase? Okay, so what are your digital requirements? Do you understand what digitals are available and the costs for your organization? So although there are a few digital tools out there like Console, which is open source and free, there's still going to be costs that are attached to this. So, and you also need to make sure that you've trained staff in how you use these tools. So is there technical support available? And also, where can citizens get support if they can't make something work? Can you have staff that are trained up to actually support citizens in using the tools themselves? So we spoke a little bit about this, but understanding what work is involved. So how many people you will actually need to get on board to support your process. And how can you evaluate success? So this is really important because you can build up a plan and a process, but unless the evaluation of it is somewhat successful or you've not met your aims, then it's a little bit pointless. So ensuring that you're capturing key data to measure your success is really important. So there's always improvement that can be made. And by running a PB process multiple times, you can also gain opportunity to iterate and improve. So you've done it last year, but next year you can make it better from using your feedback or your evaluation that you've collected from last year to make it better. So what are the key indicators you want to measure? And how will you do this? So how will you capture any other lessons learned? Have you thought about creating a learning log to capture learning as you progress through the process? Think about how you can collect a wide range of views in any evaluation you carry out. So this could be through a steering group and those of participants, but how will you do this? So this could be offline. So at events, collecting feedback forms, or even sort of video, vlogging, maybe not vlogging, but, podcasting. So collecting people's actual thoughts at an event, or it could be online. So there's no wrong or right way to do PB, but there's lots of ways, online and offline. So here are some examples, and I've used this before in the voting and idea generation webinar, but Antwerp. So for example, they decided that at the very start, they would get citizens to meet in small groups and agree the priorities for the budget. So they got people to actually think about what the priorities were before even designing proposals or putting the proposals out. And then the groups would then submit proposals within those priority themes. And the vote was then split up. So 80% were done via small groups who had to reach consensus. So they were not forced to, but they almost had to discuss and deliberate until they reached a consensus together. And then the rest of the vote was done online. But they found that online, by having an online part element to their process, that actually led to greater participation at offline events. So more people turned up to the events because they were engaged by having a look online and seeing what was out there. So I'm going to chat a little bit about New York because they're quite interesting in that they used budget delegates and facilitators who actually represented the citizens themselves to sort of decide what would happen with the proposals and the projects. So they used sort of online and offline idea generation, and the volunteers, so the budget delegates that they were called, would research what would have the most impact and then develop these ideas further before a final vote. So to be a budget delegate, you would do extra work necessary to turn ideas into real projects. So they would research into local problems, needs and projects. They would meet with citizens. They would have a lot of sort of committee meetings. And then they would prioritise and monitor and evaluate the proposals as they went on, so as they actually were ran. So you could serve as a budget delegate if you had a meaningful connection to the district, if you worked in the district, if you owned a business, attended school there, or you were a parent of a child who attends school in the district. So what delegates would have to do, they would have to attend orientation sessions, and then they would sign an agreement to say, I'm a budget delegate or whatever like that. And then they would join a committee that would be under a specific sort of issue. So for example, transportation or public safety or environment, arts and culture or housing or something like that. Or a demographic group. So a demographic group, they could be focusing on sort of trying to engage people, I don't know, so young people or older people. So they would be part of a sort of steering committee group that would be trying to target them and engage them better into participation. So delegates could also discuss with councils whether to form new demographic committees. So this meant that, so I spoke about young people and older people or even non-English speaking communities. So they would form a group to ensure the maximum participation from these specific communities. But if delegates felt that there still needed to be outreach done, then they could discuss with the council and form a new group to ensure that these people were all getting involved and it was inclusive for everyone. So delegates would prioritise projects by considering criteria, and this would include need, so the need for these projects, the impact these would have on the community, and the feasibility. So is this easy enough to do? How feasible is this? Delegates would then use an idea ranking tool to assess the various projects and then send its final project proposals to the council district staff. So the delegates themselves would go, okay, these are the final ones, we've worked on these. These are the most projects that have the highest need, impact and feasibility. And then they would get sent out to the council to be put up for a vote. And I'm sure you all know what facilitator is, but a facilitator, again, they would sign up, so they're volunteers, but they would help residents participate in neighbourhood assemblies or facilitating group discussions, and this would include facilitating the delegate meetings. So, and this meant that they're ensuring everyone was able to contribute, but also that the facilitators were kind of neutral, so they didn't side with anyone. So Paris is another example. They would submit ideas both online and at offline events. So, and people who submitted similar ideas were required to develop joint ideas in offline workshops. So they were kind of, I keep saying the word forced, but that's not true, but they were kind of put together to develop their ideas together, because there's no point in working, two people working on the same idea separately when, if you know, two heads are better than one, that kind of saying. And voting would happen both online and offline. So yeah, there's different methods for different people. So the developers of the digital tools, they actually encourage face-to-face meetings. So yeah, and then again, nowadays there's more of a focus on mobile technology. All of these digital tools, they can be used on iPads, mobile phones. It's a lot easier to use online as it is offline these days. But it's good to have both offline and online integration. Nothing can completely replace face-to-face. So digital is just part of the process. It's not the entire process. Yeah, so not everyone is online and nothing can completely replace face-to-face. It's really important to integrate online and offline networks that are already populated. So what I mean by that is community meetings that are already happening once a week. You should be including these people or these groups or these meetings into your process. And if there's already online, you know, Facebook groups or community groups, it's good to integrate this into what you're doing. So this is from the voting webinar, but having multiple votes means citizens have to consider other options. and this can open up the process to deliberation. So it's just something to consider when you're running a voting process. And digital engagement is really important for the PB process, but it just can't replace offline engagement. Face-to-face has got so much value to it. So some challenges. So going online, it brings about different challenges as well as opportunities. So I'm just going to chat a little bit about some of the things that you might have to think about. And how you might want to encourage deliberation. So security and assurance. So something that you really need to think about is when you are using an online tool or a digital tool, how secure are the systems that you're using? Are there any ways to cheat? So by testing your platform, it's quite good to test if you can cheat it, then that means someone else can cheat it. So testing your digital platform is really good, at least a week before you run your voting process, at least. So how can citizens be sure it's not a fix? So it's quite a good idea to sort of provide a little bit of assurance to citizens. So if you've got sort of registration or verification systems in place, like if I'm a citizen and I want to register online to a platform so I can vote, what information might they need, and how is the system going to know that I'm not just signing on 20 million times and voting for the same projects? So it's something to think about. So citizens need to be told, right, there's algorithms in place, it'll get flagged up to the security system, things like that, so that they feel confident to use it and it's not going to be a fix. Promotion and outreach. So how are you going to promote your PB process? There is absolutely no point in doing something if no one knows it's there. How are you going to get people to your site? So I've actually, with communities and councils, they can put their online platform already on their existing council website, but also you might want to think about encouraging people to come by putting it on already existing online platforms like Facebook groups, Twitter, social media, things that are already existing and quite active. But again, not just online, offline as well. So how are you going to encourage people to come to your site? Could you do a bit of outreach? So going to communities, going to people that already do outreach and getting them to sort of go out with iPads and getting people to go on the site that way. So not everyone has digital tools themselves or the capacity to go online. But I'm going to be chatting a little bit about this, I think, next week in our comms webinar. So there's so much to discuss in promotion and outreach. So facilitation and moderation. So we're chatting a little bit about this before, but do you have an allocated person or persons to moderate online content? So what I mean by moderation is someone to check any new proposals that are coming in, or people that are putting in new comments, or adding in new debates. And again, checking that the language is appropriate and the behaviour is appropriate. So checking this, but also maybe putting in algorithms so that they can't use swear words on the site, or that it gets flagged to the right person. So do you have a person who can facilitate debates or conversations at events and online? So it's one thing sort of facilitating this at an event, at a table discussion or a sort of debate, a live debate event, but it's another thing having to sort of facilitate online discussions, and it's very different. So for example, people that are proposing new proposals and they put that up online, and there've been comments on it, how can you encourage conversation? So for example, proposing topics of conversation, so starting by asking questions to citizens, like, do you think this is a good idea, or what do you think about this compared to this? Or creating a poll and making sure it stays on track. So the conversation that you're wanting to pull out of people, or the discussion, you want to try and make sure that stays on track. And again, if you're going to have facilitators and moderators online and offline, do you need to provide any training to these people to ensure they know how to do it, particularly online as well? So what are the sort of guidelines that they might need to moderate or facilitate? So inclusion. Who might be excluded by your choice of design? So design is so important. I'm gonna send you a link to a Spark sheet that we created a wee while ago, but if you've got a design that's like sort of too messy, or the you know, the font size or whatever, it's not readable, it's not easy to understand, then you're excluding people literally by your design on your tool. But again, design doesn't have to just mean the design of your tool. It could mean sort of your events, time and place of events. Is it accessible to people? Is it accessible to most people? You know, if you're going to do it on a Monday morning, are most people going to be at work? But if you do it on a Saturday afternoon, more people might be able to come, or you know, parents with their children might be able to bring their children along, so you're getting to more people. Not everyone can access digital tools, so it's important to understand the sort of digital literacy. Is there support available where people can be supported to make their vote, or participate in discussion at offline as well as online? And sensory disabilities could be a barrier. So sight, hearing, you know, can, if you're doing a digital tool, could you have a sort of voice tool or some video or audio transcription of what's being said? And again, complex language could deter some people. So if you're going to use fancy language, is it easy to understand, and is it even necessary? So think about just trying to keep it simple and easy to understand, which is really important. So this is a quote that I love, but we need to make every single thing accessible to every single person with a disability. And there's a link down here, so if you want to, it's sort of how to make your platform a little bit more accessible, and that's the link here. But these slides I'll be putting on Knowledge Hub and also our DemStock website, so if you want to access this later, then that's fine. So fairness and trust. How can you make sure this is a fair process? How can you show people that it's trustworthy? So we're talking a little bit about getting people involved from the outset, so they actually are deciding how the process is going to work for them. So being transparent from the outset, like what, you know, if something's gone wrong last year, for example, you could be like, okay, this is the problems we had last year, but this is how we're trying to change it. You're kind of building that trust, and who's holding the responsibility to ensure that the outcomes are met? Is it people running the process, or is it everyone? Is it citizens, because citizens have designed the process? And who is taking accountability? So what I mean by accountability is, if something goes wrong, people like to place blame. So who's going to take accountability for the projects, the event, the facilitation? You know, there's roles in each sort of part of the process. So what happens if mistakes are made or things go wrong? So it's good to have a little bit of a backup plan, but if you're transparent from the outset, it's easy to hold your hands up and go, okay, this happened because of this, but here's how we're going to fix it, and here's how we're going to move on. So again, it's just building that sense of trust with your citizens. Transparency. So this kind of comes under a little bit of inclusion, but can citizens easily see and understand what's happening and why? So, you know, why are you having an event on a Monday morning when everyone's at work? Like, is that fair? Or why is the vote 2 weeks long? Can you explain why you're having it for such a long period of time? Oh, it's because we want to more people to be able to vote online. So it's good to kind of not, you know, explain things, but in a very easy to understand manner. And so why are you using PB? What has happened to your chosen projects? So I mean, like, say for example, you've got 10 projects that were successful last year. What happened to them? Is there any evidence of how well they worked? Is there any evaluation of how well they've worked? So people want to find out what's happened. You know, we've spent time generating ideas and discussing and deliberating and then voting on them. So by having that sort of, you know, what happened to your chosen projects, or a sort of timeline of things like video or media that they can follow, it's a good idea, so that again, it builds that sort of trust. You know, the money's not just being spent willy-nilly, it's going to projects and the projects are running successfully. So again, making citizens accountable for their own projects. I was talking a little bit about milestones, so people can see exactly where the projects are, if they've met their milestones or if they've met their goals. So here is a little example. This is on the console tool, but they've got finished participatory budgets, so 2016, 2017, and 2018. So here you can see the results, and then you can click on milestones as well. So to the left, this is the milestones from 2017, and you can see the projects. So these are winning projects, but you can click on them and you can see how far they've gone. So citizens can actually put up their projects, and then they can go, okay, so 2 months in, we managed to get 10 more young people to join our youth project, or and we've met this goal, or we've met this milestone. So this picture on the left is a video of 2 young people talking to the mayor. So the mayor is actually being asked questions about how the PB process worked. So he's answering, you know, it could be some awkward questions, you know, why didn't this go well, or what do you think could be done better for next year? And because it's in video format, people can actually see, and it's giving that sense of transparency. But again, promotion for next year. So if you've put up your projects and how well they've done, you're saying, okay, this is an ongoing process. It's not just one-off thing, it's ongoing, and remember to keep working on it for next year and making it better and better. So, is it easy to use? So and when I say easy to use, I'm mostly talking about your digital tool in this sense. So a big part of why they're useful is because it makes it easier to take part. You know, it removes that time and space, that element of time and space constriction. You've got a little bit longer to go online, or if you've got this sort of digital capacity to, you've got a mobile phone or you've got a laptop at home, you can. How can you avoid needless barriers and make this experience as easy as possible for people to log on and just click? So is it a simple link? Are there simple instructions and guidelines? Is the voting process easy to understand? So if you're interested in finding a little bit more out about voting, there's the voting webinar, which is on YouTube. So, and there's some guidelines there on how to sort of give out some easy instructions for voting. But again, the guidelines could be video, photo, infographics, and it's really important to have a strong communications program. So from the very start of your process, you want to be telling people how it's going to work, and who can people contact for help. Is there a helpline, or is there an email, or anything like that? So data protection. What data do you need to collect for your process to be robust and secure? So what I mean by this is, when citizens are registering, what information would you need to collect to ensure that their vote is you know, secure? So it's not, you can't do any fraud or anything like that. So what information might you need? Have you got an age limit? So do they have to be 12 and above? So does that mean that you'll have to ask for their date of birth or their postcode, because it's specifically in a specific area of a town? And how can you collect data in a legal and ethical way? So you need to think about the legal implications. You know, I'm talking about GDPR and things like that. And how can you avoid collecting unnecessary data at all? So people will not fill in a two-page form that's asking you, you know, what's your address, what's your favorite color, what's your name, what's your postcode, what's your date of birth, what's your school that you went to. It's too much information that you're asking. So you want to keep it as small and simple as possible. And can you provide options for citizens to be anonymous when posting on your platform? So not everyone will feel comfortable posting as their own name. So if you're doing a sort of debate section, or you're doing, you're trying to get people to comment on proposals or provide suggestions, not everyone would like to stay as themselves. Some people do prefer to be anonymous. So it's good to have these options. So going back to evaluation, going online means you can use different ways to evaluate your process. So some of these are knowing how many, who, and when people have accessed your site. Who is contributing to dialogue and when? Who is voting and when? So is it close to the deadline? Are they changing their vote last minute? So what I mean is, who's voting? Not everyone will know this, only the administrators will know this, and this is for security reasons. Not always, but on some platforms in the back office, administrators can have, they won't know who is voting for which projects, but they can have a list of the people who are voting. So they need this information in case there's any double voters, or, you know, someone trying to scam or fraud into the voting system. So this is the data that's collected in the back office. And is there a feedback analysis for ease of use, or like feedback forms, or for even voting events? And how easy is this to collect feedback, or how easy is this for citizens to fill in really quickly? And some things you really want to consider was it meaningful to citizens? So was the actual process meaningful to people? So when I was talking about the back office, this is an example of participatory. So you can see at the top, this is just a demo, so it's not actually a live tool or anything, but 98 registrations. So there's, at the bottom it says, on the left top corner, it says 9 to validate. So that means the administrator will have to go in and validate these people before they can go in and vote. But you can see here there's already been 66 votes, 46 proposals, and there's different algorithms you can set to find out different bits of information. So if you're wanting to find out how many people under the age of 21 voted, or how many people, depending on what data you've collected at the start. So there's different ways you can do this. And this is an example of Consul's back office administration, so the statistics. So how many proposals got votes, debates, comments, things like that. And again, you can sort of change it to suit what you're trying to do. Okay, so timelines. So timelines are really useful, because if you've got a timeline, it can be transparent, so people can see exactly what dates you're trying to sort of set, what's your goals. So I want to run an idea generation phase between March and June, and then after that I'm going to do a support phase or a deliberation phase, and then after I'm going to do a vote. So what are the key dates that people should know about? Are there any key meetings or events that people can come to? It's really good to set timelines so you can have these dates in advance. And so staff know exactly what they're working towards as well. So this is an example of New York's timeline. So they've got between July and August planning the process. So they've even put in the actual, you know, planning does take a little bit of time. So information sessions, district committee meetings. So this is when the district team would try and talk about how the process should work. And then collecting ideas, recruiting budget delegates, having assemblies and community meetings, and then developing proposals and having meetings to develop these proposals, and then sharing these proposals and voting on them. And then obviously evaluation and monitoring of these proposals and how they turned out. So this is a bit of a blurry picture, but this is Fife's timeline. So they actually did it over a few years. And they've got Glenrothes, Kirkcaldy, Southwest Fife, and Cowdenbeath, and I can't see the bottom one. I think it says Livermouth. Oh, anyway, so they had the exact same thing. So voting, which ward did what, and the sort of outcomes that they were trying to reach. So this is an example of one in America, Indiana. So they had their sort of first steering committee, and you can see down here steering committee training. So the people on the steering committee had to go through some training, so some rules. So they actually created some rules together, And then they would have the delegate selection, delegate or training, proposals, and then meetings, presentation, proposal development, and then voting, and then announcing the results, and then again, evaluation and monitoring. So this is just another little example of what it could look like. So I'm just going to go very quickly over some of the tools, and then that should be us finished. So some tools that you can help with your planning. Office timeline. So this is what this could look like. So it's a free tool that you can use. Trello, so you can actually do a bit of planning, creating boards, lists, or cards to sort of prioritize tasks. Again, it's a bit of a blurry picture, but you can see how it might look. Basecamp, again, it's quite similar to Trello in that you can create sort of cards, but project planning. But a good thing to think about is if you're working with another organisation, can both organisations use the same tool, and how will this work together? So it's another thing to think about. So this one is Time Mapper. So a lot of the Time Mapper stuff is done historically, but again, you can add in little bits of information. So it's another tool you can use if you're wanting to add in. And then Lucidchart as well. And then, okay, so next week, I think we're doing one on how to be comms savvy, but we've also got webinars on integrating online and offline, making the case for digital PB, community mapping, inclusion in digital, and we're going to have one on verification, security, and registration as well. So something else to put in the diary. Okay, I'm just going to stop sharing now. Can everyone hear me still?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that Holly as well? Does anyone have any questions?
You said at the beginning, are you going to put this on YouTube?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I got distracted halfway through, so I could do with probably rewatching it again.
Oh, that's all right, don't worry. I spoke very quickly because I'm aware that it's almost like so much information to cram in an hour, but it'll be up on YouTube and the slides will be on Knowledge Hub as well. So
Perfect.
is Nadia and Holly, are you still here?
Yes.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Hello. Do you have any questions?
I'm all right. Thank you.
All right. Cool. Okay. So Jen, I know you're quite interested in the comms stuff, I think. So I think next week, and I've still to confirm dates, but we'll be doing a communications webinar. So we've got two, and I think they're going to be quite useful in like if you're ever doing communication stuff. It's not even just for PB, it's just in general as well.
Yeah, that's exactly why I don't do too much. I'm not involved too much in PB, but I'm involved in a lot of stuff talking about in your podcast.
Cool. That's good to hear.
Yeah, no, keep going, you're doing that.